other information. If you've never known a Jew, if you've never known a Baptist, if you've never, then I wonder how powerful the media can be. And I think the less you know, the more powerful the media can be. And the more you know, the more I think a stereotype breaks down.
So I take it you shouldn't drink the water.
Andy Garcia? Wait, not Andy Garcia.
Gloria Estefan and Jennifer Lopez.
EJO, Edward James Olmos, Antonio Banderas, Jennifer Lopez.
In films?
Right.
Not really, because I don't really pay attention to them.
Antonio Banderas, Jennifer Lopez.
See Latinos being portrayed as intellectual or someone that's really admirable. If they are, it's just like Antonio Banderas being a warrior or something like that, which isn't, I wouldn't say too admirable really.
Like in Texas Rangers, that was thugs. Like, drug dealers and stuff.
Jennifer Lopez, usually like the sexy star girl who's in the movie.
Right.
And Antonio Banderas played the good guy, played the bad guy, like Zorro and Assassins.
You say that the responses as to the kinds of portrayals is like gangsters and even assassins and things of this sort, and yet in response to what stars or what actors you recall, Antonio Banderas and Jennifer Lopez, and to my recollection they have really done a lot of, certainly Banderas, a lot of gangster films, maybe the Mambo Kings, but I don't think he was a gangster, he was a musician, and then he's on Zorro.
Stars like Antonio Banderas usually play positive roles in their films. This can be attributed to his popularity, but such roles may also contribute to it. Even so, most people interviewed had trouble recalling positive roles, such as Zorro.
What else has he done? It's been more like Desperado, where he, was more like a vigilante, kind of like, lone hero type thing, as opposed to a gangster. I mean, the gangsters were the guys that he was fighting against. But yet, even though the stars that get recollected are, somebody like Banderas, who doesn't really have a history of gangster movies, yet, was a portrayal of a gangster. So I don't know what to make of that, but it's something to think about.
Do you think these roles reflect Latinos positively or negatively?
It's indifferent, I'd have to say.
For most of the roles I've seen, it's reflecting Latinos as negative. It shows them as a majority of the crime, when it's not true.
You have to have bad people, and therefore, you can put Asians in there. You know how Asian people are always thugs too?
Right.
Like the martial artists.
Oh no, I'm staying here.
Well, not all of us are martial artists.
Can you have my card?
It's like that. Same thing, same exact thing.
But storytelling is just, we need storytelling. That's what we're all about. It's all about stories. I mean, Bush and Gore are telling stories up until today. I mean, there's stories upon stories. And that, we need that to make sense of things.
Media is not reality. I mean, even when it's recording reality, it's not reality. So, I think what they said was actually very profound. In other words, they're recognizing that it's mediated, which means it is, you're making choices from reality, even if it's documentary. You are making choices as to length and editing and camera angles and all of those things. So it's not reality, you know, it is mediated reality. So on the other hand, if you don't have any information about a particular group, if you've never met an Italian, an American, ever, and you just don't, there aren't any in your town, you don't know any, and if all you saw was, if your only information about Italian Americans was from the media and from movies, I wonder what your conception of Italian Americans would be. Might you think that they were connected to the mafia when you met one, you know? And I think that's where it starts to get a little problematic. In other words, the way you kind of, if you don't have any other information, the way you kind of use the information that you have to kind of set up a category. And I know that I have actually met Italian American people and wondered, not that I've asked them, but I've wondered. I wonder if her dad is in the mafia or something like that. I mean, you know, because in the media, they're all in the mafia, you know, they're, you know, and that repeated kind of imagery, I think, works on you, particularly if you don't have anything else to bounce it off against.
I think there's some kind of a relationship that's there, like with the screen, or like the big like Hollywood screen, the big like screen or whatever. That's like a mirror, so to say. And people, like when you go to theater, somebody has to, like when you go to theater, you're watching a movie and you get this big screen, this big setting or whatever. You're looking at this screen with colorful objects, and you're gonna try to attach yourself to one of the characters. You know what I'm saying? So you try to draw qualities off of that, and this is the representation in which, you know, these people act, which this is filtered through a character. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So at some point, you know, during that process, you know, when they're they're taking the information in, they're gonna fulfill whatever is being portrayed because that's what they think is supposed to be Latino or, you know, the main character. Does that make sense?
Right.
Dad, a gig in Monterrey, Mexico,
Dad, that would be so cool.
I'm not sure of that.
Representations of Latinos in Selena offer depth not usually found in major Hollywood productions. The film finds humor in the Mexican-American experience by exploring the difficult reality of being a Latino in the United States.
Selena's Spanish is...
What about my Spanish? I've been singing in Spanish for 10 years. It's perfect.
Singing, yes, but when you speak it a little funny. And down there, you gotta speak perfectly or the press will eat you up and spit you out alive. I've seen them do it.
Overreacting as usual.
Dad, the music will speak for itself, Dad.
Listen, being Mexican-American is tough. Anglos jump all over you if you don't speak English perfectly. Mexicans jump all over you if you don't speak Spanish perfectly. We gotta be twice as perfect as anybody else. Why are you laughing? What's so funny?
Nothing.
I'm serious.
Our
family has been here for centuries, and yet they treat us as if we just swam across the Rio Grande. I mean, we gotta know about John Wayne and Pedro Infante. We gotta know about Frank Sinatra and Agustin Lara. We gotta know about Oprah and Christina. Anglo food is too bland, and yet when we go to Mexico, we get the runs. Now that, to me, is embarrassing.
Dad!
Japanese Americans, Italian Americans, German Americans, their homeland is on the other side of the ocean. Ours is right next door, right over there. And we gotta prove to the Mexicans how Mexican we are, and we gotta prove to the Americans how American we are. We gotta be more Mexican than the Mexicans and more American than the Americans, both at the same time. It's exhausting. Man, nobody knows how tough it is to be a Mexican American.
Well, it's like a defeatist mentality. I mean, it's every time there's like a new cool like Latino movie, it usually has to do with gangs or, you know, a single mother or it's I guess basically the context where it's thrown. There's not really too many films focused on Latinos. They're just kind of like in the picture somewhere, like, you know, these big Hollywood blockbuster, you know, things or whatever. That Bruce Willis or Arnold Schwarzenegger's a star, but he's got a Mexican sidekick somewhere along the way. Cheech Marin, you know, that's another one. But let me see. Yeah, so they're just. I don't think there's really any focus on them right now. It's more just like somewhere tucked off in the side. It's representation of pop culture.
In terms of just the numbers, I mean, I just think the more images we have up there, the better off we're going to be. You know, if it was just one token actor, you know, then I would say, gee, yeah, I don't know. But there are many. I mean, you know, Selma Hayek, Jennifer Lopez, Antonio Banderas, those are kind of like the big ones. But just below that, there's a whole group of kind of supporting stars who show up, and we don't even notice them, but you know, they're there. You know, Luis Guzman, who was in Magnolia, and before that he was in Boogie Nights, and he's, you know, and he's there, and he's around, and he never plays the lead, but he's there. So I think besides those top flight stars, we have all this other kind of talent that's going to help, you know. So I think just the numbers, once again, if you think about the Irish experience, I mean, you know, you had Mickey Rooney, you had Maureen O'Hara, you had Gene Kelly, you had Donald O'Connor, you know, you just had so many, James Cagney, you know, you just had so many stars that, once again, it was just the numbers. So I think a critical mass will help. And nobody talks about Cameron Diaz because she hasn't played any Latina roles. But that doesn't bother me. I mean, once again, in terms of the numbers, let's just get people out there, okay? And Andy Garcia. So it doesn't bother me that she hasn't played a Latina. Just the fact that her last name is Diaz, I mean, people have to deal with that. You know, you have to deal with that in some way, you know. You can choose to ignore it, or you can kind of scratch your head and say, gee, she doesn't look like what I think a Latina should look like, you know. And that's the point, you know, that we look very different. You know, we are a very heterogeneous ethnic group. We look like a lot of things, you know, from very fair to African American. I mean, you know, that's the gamut, and all shades of brown in between. That's who we are.
Depending on some of the movies, you know, some of the movies I've seen them in, they were sidekicks to some of the main stars and everything, and then some like I watched Giant and everything, and that one I did not care for, you know, the way that they portrayed them in that and everything. But really, it's to me, that was kind of probably the way that, from what I understand, it was treated out here in some of the states at that time and everything. So.
Right, because in Giant, there's, I don't know if you've seen the movie, but there's like a really problematic representation. I mean, well, first of all, they call it Mexicans, you know, because it takes place in Texas, right? You know, James Dean, and it's about the oil business, and it's actually a classic, but it's what, in the 50s, Giant is, and so there's a few scenes. There's one in particular where Mexicans, as they call them, wouldn't be allowed to sit in the same areas in, say, like a diner or in a place like that, or they actually wouldn't be permitted to eat, you know, there. And
because my mother, my Mexican mother, took me to see Giant, and the reason she took me was as kind of a lesson in ethnic pride, you know. Because, have you seen Giant?
No, I haven't seen it.
No.
In this scene from Giant, the cattle rancher Benedict goes against the grain by standing up for a Mexican family.
Hey, you!
Oh, now let's see. The big train should be arriving in Benedict around 1:30. That should give the Hollywood people time enough to make their
Buenos
trip to
dias.
Dallas.
You're in the wrong place, amigo. Come on, let's get out of here. Vamos, andale. Your money's no good here. Come on, let's go. You two.
Hold on a minute.
Yes? What do you want?
Now, look here, Sarge. Sure appreciate it if you're a little more polite to these people.
Oh, you would you?
I'm Vic Benedict. Your neighbor, you might say.
Does that give you special privileges?
The name Benedict's meant something to people around here for a considerable time.
That there papoose down there. His name Benedict, too?
Yeah, come to think of it. It is.
All right, forget I asked you. Now, you just go back over there and sit down, and we ain't gonna have no trouble. But this bunch here is gonna eat somewhere else. All right, come on, let's go.
Thank you.
Come on, you two. Soon.
From our perspective, okay, it was a very positive film. in that it was portraying a Texas reality, which was discrimination and heavy-duty discrimination. And my mother had experienced that discrimination, and so what she was doing is kind of giving me a lesson in kind of cultural studies. So I had a much different kind of reaction.
Clear and Present Danger, based on Tom Clancy's best-selling novel, deals with America's escalating war on drugs. In the film, the U.S. takes the war to Colombia, seeking out and destroying the drug factories.
Pásame de balde. Mira, necesito 2 bolsas. Cuidado con eso. Sí. Cuidado. Yo tengo 3 kilos. Oye, Lucho, apúrate.
So, I say Colombia, what do you think?
Drug cartel.
Okay, say no more. And Colombia is a wonderful country. There's really bright people. I'm not from Colombia, I'm from Venezuela. And in Venezuela, and this is again, this is something outside of the U.S., but this notion of the other is everywhere, in the Western world, at least the world that I know. In Venezuela, the villains are the Colombians. All evils that befall Venezuela are because there's too many Colombians in Venezuela, and they're, organizing the mafias and they're stealers and thieves and everything else.
Yeah, Colombian drug lords. It's like it's one word, Colombian drug lords.
Colombians in Clear and Present Danger are portrayed, for the most part, stereotypically. The majority of them are dirty peasants who make and run the drugs. Then there are the drug lords, rude, arrogant, and indiscriminately violent. But while such stereotypes continue to pervade Hollywood, Latinos and their culture are growing more prominent in the U.S., perhaps heralding an eventual end to stereotyping.
A mí. Y a su mujer, y a su hijo, y a su hija, aparentemente sin pensar en las consecuencias.
Oh, sí, señor. Para que sus hijos tengan la muerte de su padre cuando menos lo espere.
Ese tío era un gran amigo y un aliado político del presidente de los Estados Unidos.
There's nobody alive today that hasn't lived with film. So while it is very young, it is what we know. Okay, and we only have this one life, at least that we remember. Anyway, we won't get into reincarnations and things like that, but this is what we remember. And so this has always been for all of the people that are alive in the planet today. There's always been that. And so it becomes, extremely powerful. And of course, the images that film and then later on television has used don't come from thin air. They again borrowed from previous traditions of storytelling.
But it's surprising, if you go back in history, one of the things I've learned just by going back and looking at films is it's not as simple as it might appear. There's a lot of stereotyping, don't get me wrong, but it wasn't all stereotyping. Okay. There were films that broke away from that. There were filmmakers who tried to do something different. There were performers who kind of subverted the stereotype, and Jose Ferrero was one of them. So when he plays the South American dictator, there's an interesting way in which he makes it more than a stereotype. It's not just another dictator stereotype.
People, perhaps not so much for film, but it does reach a lot of people. Then with the advent of those ways of massively reaching audiences, and doing so in such a powerful way, not just through a printed word that you can leave and it's not so impactful, but actually having your imagination fixed onto an image, then the power to perpetuate stereotypes or to actually, grind them in becomes considerable. And so, that's one reason why we need to, pay attention to them. Not to demonize them and to say, oh, bad, 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 and to whine or anything like that, but to pay attention to how important it is. We don't take it lightly.
The stereotype is a category, and if the category isn't going to be useful, then you discard the category. This category is not, it's not helping me, so I don't need to use that category anymore. It's an inaccurate category.
And productions, big-time productions, high quality in terms of production values, films and other productions will get made if there is a likelihood of a return. If whoever the investor is going to be sees the potential for return and then some profit, and it's it'd be really hard to convince some potential investor that we're going to really show how it is that Latinos came to be this way in society. And it's like, well, where's the story and who are you going to cast and where's money? Where's the hook? Where's Banderas? Where's Jennifer's ass? What's the deal? Talk to me, man. I can't waste my time on this. And that's the way it works. That's just the medium. And to engage in a critique of that system will take us in a different direction. We're just talking about what is right now. And it doesn't mean that there aren't some films where some very very thoughtful stuff goes on, but to actually develop all the socioeconomic history and the way that things have led to this point in time, it's not easy to do in a commercially viable format.
And I think the less you know, the more powerful the media can be. And the more you know, the more I think a stereotype breaks down.
Here comes one now.
She looks just like Salinas. Pues orale, rewind. Come on, man. Let's go. Let's go. Fast.
Hey, can you guys help us out? We're stuck.
It is Salinas. Salinas. Bájate, güey.
We've been stuck for a long time.
Dude, stop stopping, dude. I know this shit just snuck up on us, man. We need to get pulled out.
Okay, we hit this, bro. I got a V8 400 horses, ese. I can pull anything out of anywhere.
Mi hermanita's not gonna believe this. Dale. Right, hey, just pull it forward, dude, and ride in reverse. We'll hook it up. Yeah, right here.
Thanks.
Let's go. Come on, we're gonna do it, man. All right, come on. Muévete, come on, dale, güey, dale, come on. Come on, go fast, dude, come on. Give it to her. Come on.